Welcome back, my dear listeners. I'm your host, Cindy, and tonight I am going to help you sleep. Find a comfortable position to listen to our cozy and calming bedtime story. Close your eyes. Take a deep breath. Inhale. Exhale. Feel the tension leave your body. Let's begin. Our story tonight is about Natalie and Matt. Natalie had always lived her life with vibrant splashes of color. As an artist, she spent her days in her studio, surrounded by canvases that overflowed with every hue imaginable. Her hands were often speckled with shades of cobalt blue or crimson red, remnants of her passion for painting. Art was how she expressed herself, how she processed the world. But lately, her days had started to blur together, the endless swirl of paint not quite enough to keep her mind engaged. That was why, when her friend convinced her to join a cooking class, she thought it would be a fun change of pace. At first, Natalie didn't take the class too seriously. It was something to do on weeknights after long days in the studio. She figured it was just another creative outlet, a way to unwind without the pressure of creating something to sell. But soon enough, she found herself falling in love with the intricacies of cooking. The careful measuring, the way ingredients came together to form something new, the artistry in plating. It reminded her of painting, but with a different kind of medium. The cooking class was held in a charming little kitchen studio in Manhattan, nestled between rows of brick buildings. Inside, the space was warm and inviting, with gleaming countertops and shelves filled with fresh herbs and vegetables. Every evening, the smell of garlic and onions sizzling in olive oil filled the air, mingling with the rich aromas of roasted meats and simmering sauces. Natalie had been attending the class for about a month when Matt walked in. She was used to seeing the same group of people each week, a mix of friendly regulars and the occasional newcomer. But Matt was different. From the moment he entered the room, he seemed to command attention, though not in an overtly confident way. There was something quiet and magnetic about him. Matt stood out with his casual, laid-back style. His dark hair was slightly unruly, as if he'd just run his fingers through it after a long day. His hazel eyes held a depth that seemed to reflect the warmth of the kitchen light, and his strong, lean frame made him look like someone who spent time outdoors. His face was framed by a light shadow of stubble, which gave him a rugged yet approachable appearance. That night, they were learning to make risotto, a dish that Natalie had always thought of as impossibly complicated. As she stood at her station, stirring the rice, Matt settled into the spot next to her. His quiet presence immediately set her nerves alight. He glanced at her with a small smile, his eyes lingering just long enough to make her heart skip. "Hey, is this your first time making risotto?" he asked, his deep voice surprising her. Natalie looked up from her pan, smiling back. "Yeah, I've never tried it before. It feels like a lot of pressure to get it just right." Matt nodded, turning his attention to his own station. "It's all about patience, I think." Their conversation flowed naturally as they cooked side by side, talking about the creative process, books, and the similarities between art and cooking. Natalie found herself drawn to Matt's calm, thoughtful nature. There was something about the way he spoke, like every word was measured but full of meaning. As the instructor walked around the room, guiding them through each step of the risotto, Natalie glanced over at Matt's dish. His risotto was coming together beautifully. The rice was creamy, and the mushrooms he had added were perfectly sautéed, glistening with just the right amount of olive oil. "That looks incredible," she said, gesturing to his pan. "Thanks," Matt said, his smile softening. "But I think yours looks even better." Natalie's risotto was indeed coming together nicely. The arborio rice had absorbed the broth, becoming creamy and rich. She had added a squeeze of lemon for brightness, along with some freshly grated Parmesan, which melted into the dish, giving it a velvety texture. For garnish, she scattered a handful of chopped parsley over the top, adding a pop of color. As they plated their dishes, Natalie couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. She had never thought of herself as much of a cook, but seeing the final result, a beautifully plated risotto with golden mushrooms and a sprinkle of parsley, made her realize that maybe she was better at this than she'd thought. They sat down at one of the communal tables to eat, and as they tasted their food, Matt looked impressed. "This is really good," he said, savoring a bite. "You've got some serious skills." "Thanks," Natalie said, smiling shyly. "I'm still learning, though. Cooking is kind of like a side hobby for me." "What's your main thing, then?" Matt asked, genuinely curious. "I'm a painter," Natalie said, her eyes lighting up as she spoke about her art. "I sell paintings online and at galleries sometimes. It's what I do full-time." Matt's eyes lit up with interest. "That's amazing. What kind of stuff do you paint?" "Mostly landscapes, but I like to experiment with abstract stuff, too." "It depends on my mood," she said. "What about you? You said you're a writer?" "Yeah," Matt said, leaning back in his chair. "I write fiction. A lot of it's inspired by nature, like lakes, rivers, mountains. I'll sit by the water for hours, just writing. There's something calming about it." Natalie found herself captivated by the way Matt talked about his writing. There was a depth to him, a passion for his work that resonated with her own love for painting. As they talked, she felt a connection forming between them, a mutual understanding of the creative process and the joy of making something from nothing. By the end of the evening, they had exchanged phone numbers, promising to keep in touch. Natalie left the class that night feeling hopeful, her mind swirling with thoughts of Matt. He was kind, thoughtful, and there was something about him that made her heart race. But days passed, and Matt never texted. Natalie tried not to dwell on it, but every time her phone buzzed, she couldn't help but hope it was him. She told herself that maybe he was just busy, or maybe he had lost interest, but deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling of disappointment. Days passed after their cooking class together, and Natalie found herself thinking about Matt more than she would have liked to admit. Every time her phone buzzed, she hoped it was him, but the message she was waiting for never came. She tried to rationalize it. Maybe he was busy with his writing, or maybe their conversation hadn't meant as much to him as it had to her. Still, it stung. Natalie distracted herself with her painting, but even there, her thoughts drifted to Matt. She began working on a new piece, a landscape inspired by one of the lakes she'd visited upstate. The sky in her painting was a soft gradient of pink and orange, reflecting off the glassy water. Tall trees lined the horizon, their leaves tinged with autumn colors, casting long shadows across the surface of the lake. As she painted, she thought of what Matt had said about writing near water, how nature inspired his stories. She wondered what kind of words he would write about a scene like this. At her next cooking class, she was surprised to see Matt walk in again. Her heart fluttered as he took his usual spot next to her. He greeted her with a warm smile, but something felt different. He hadn't messaged her all week, and Natalie couldn't shake the feeling of disappointment that had been building inside her. "Hey, Natalie," he said, pulling out his utensils. "How've you been?" "Good," she replied, trying to sound casual, though her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Just busy with some new paintings." "That sounds great. I'd love to see them sometime," Matt said, his voice genuinely interested. "Maybe you could show me after class." Natalie's heart skipped a beat at the suggestion, but she hesitated. Why hadn't he reached out before now? She wanted to say yes, but something held her back. "Maybe," she said, her tone more guarded than she intended. "I've been pretty swamped lately." Matt seemed to notice the shift in her mood, but before he could say anything more, the instructor began the class, explaining the night's lesson on pasta making. They were going to be learning how to make fresh fettuccine from scratch, along with a rich, creamy Alfredo sauce. As they got to work, Natalie focused on the task at hand, trying to push away the nagging thoughts about Matt. The feel of the dough beneath her hands was oddly soothing as she kneaded it, working it until it became soft and elastic. Next to her, Matt was doing the same, and they exchanged a few light-hearted comments about the process. "Making pasta is kind of like a workout," Matt joked, his arms flexing as he pressed the dough against the counter. "I didn't know cooking would be so physical." Natalie laughed despite herself. "Yeah, who needs a gym membership when you've got pasta to make?" They rolled out the dough together, stretching it thin before feeding it through the pasta machine. The long strands of fettuccine emerged from the rollers in perfect, even ribbons. Natalie found herself enjoying the process, and for a moment, she forgot about the tension between them. The smell of garlic and butter soon filled the room as they prepared the Alfredo sauce. Matt stood beside her, stirring the sauce in a pan as it thickened, the Parmesan cheese melting into the creamy mixture. Added a pinch of freshly grated nutmeg, a tip she'd learned from the instructor to enhance the flavor. "This smells amazing," Matt said, inhaling the aroma. "I think we're getting pretty good at this." Natalie smiled, feeling a flicker of the connection they'd shared before. "Yeah, I think we might have a future as chefs after all." As they plated their dishes, Natalie couldn't help but notice how easy it was to fall back into conversation with Matt. They ate their pasta together at the communal table, and for a moment, it felt like things were back to normal. But as the night drew to a close, Natalie remembered the unanswered texts and the uncertainty that still lingered between them. Before they left, Matt turned to her with a hopeful look. "Hey, do you want to grab coffee sometime? Maybe after class next week?" Natalie's heart soared at the invitation, but she reminded herself to stay cautious. "Sure," she said with a small smile. "That sounds nice." The following week, Natalie couldn't help but feel excited as she prepared for her coffee date with Matt. After their last cooking class, she had started to believe that maybe she'd been overthinking things. Maybe Matt liked her as much as she liked him, and she just needed to be patient. They met at a cozy cafe near the cooking studio, a small place with mismatched chairs and shelves lined with books. The air smelled of freshly brewed coffee and warm pastries, and the low hum of conversation created a relaxed, intimate atmosphere. Natalie arrived a few minutes early, nervously fiddling with her phone as she waited for Matt. When he walked in, he spotted her immediately, flashing her that familiar, warm smile. "Hey, Natalie," he said, sliding into the chair across from her. "Sorry, I'm a little late. I got caught up with some edits." "No problem," she said, feeling her nerves melt away a little. "I've been thinking about that pasta we made last week. I'm still craving it." Matt laughed. "Yeah, it was pretty great, wasn't it? We should try making it again sometime." They ordered coffee and spent the next hour talking, the conversation flowing easily. Matt told her about the novel he was working on, how he was in the middle of a chapter where his characters were traveling through the wilderness. Natalie listened intently, fascinated by the way his mind worked, how he crafted stories from the world around him. But just as they were getting comfortable, Matt's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at the screen, and Natalie noticed his expression change. "I'm really sorry," he said, his voice tight with concern. "I just got a text. My friend was in an accident. I need to go check on him." Natalie's heart sank, but she quickly masked her disappointment. "Of course, I understand. I hope he's okay." Matt stood up, giving her an apologetic look. "I'll text you later, okay?" She nodded, watching as he hurried out of the cafe. Alone at the table, Natalie sipped her coffee, trying to shake off the sinking feeling that had settled in her chest. She told herself that it wasn't Matt's fault. His friend needed him. But it didn't make the disappointment any easier to bear. A few days later, Natalie decided to visit a book fair in Bryant Park. The crisp autumn air was filled with the scent of fallen leaves, and the park was bustling with people browsing through rows of bookstalls. It was one of those picture-perfect days in New York. Sunlight filtering through the trees, casting dappled shadows on the ground. As Natalie wandered through the stalls, her fingers brushing over the spines of old novels, she felt a sense of peace. Books had always been her escape, her refuge, and there was something comforting about being surrounded by them. But as she turned the corner, her eyes landed on a familiar figure. Matt. He was standing by one of the bookstalls, laughing and talking with a girl. The girl was tall and graceful, with long, wavy brown hair that cascaded down her back. She was dressed in a stylish coat and boots, and there was something about the way she smiled at Matt that made Natalie a heart sink. They were close. Too close. Natalie watched as Matt leaned in to say something, and the girl laughed, her eyes shining with warmth. It was the kind of moment that would have made Natalie a heart swell with hope if it had been her standing beside him. But instead, it felt like a knife twisting in her chest. Without thinking, Natalie turned and walked away, her mind racing. All the hope she'd felt over the past few weeks crumbled in an instant. She had thought that maybe Matt liked her, that maybe there was something between them. But now it was clear that she had been wrong. Natalie hurried out of the book fair, her heart heavy with confusion and hurt. The sight of Matt with that girl was burned into her mind, and she couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. She knew she didn't have any claim over him. They were just friends, after all. But she had hoped for something more. The connection she thought they shared suddenly felt one-sided, and it made her question everything that had happened between them. As she walked down the streets of New York, her mind raced with conflicting thoughts. She thought about how attentive Matt had been during their cooking classes, the way he seemed genuinely interested in her art, how he had laughed with her over pasta. It all seemed so real, so meaningful at the time. But now, with the image of him and that girl replaying in her head, she wondered if she had misread everything. Natalie spent the next few days feeling distant, both from her art and from her usual routines. She couldn't bring herself to return to cooking class or respond to Matt's texts, which had been coming in regularly since their interrupted coffee date. Each time her phone buzzed, she saw his name flash across the screen, but she couldn't bring herself to open the messages. What could he possibly say that would make things better? "Hey, are you okay? Haven't heard from you in a bit," read one message. "Hope everything's all right. Let me know if you want to grab coffee again," said another. The more he reached out, the more Natalie felt torn. She didn't want to confront him, to ask about the girl at the book fair, but the uncertainty was eating her alive. Part of her wanted to forget about him, to protect herself from the possibility of more heartache, but another part couldn't help but wonder what could have been if she had just spoken up. Finally, after days of avoiding him, Matt approached her after class one evening. Natalie had been packing up her things quickly, trying to leave before anyone could stop her, but Matt was waiting for her by the door. "Natalie, wait," he said, his voice urgent yet gentle. She hesitated, her fingers tightening around the straps of her bag. "What is it, Matt? Can we talk?" he asked, his hazel eyes searching her face for some sign of what was going on. "I feel like something's wrong, and I don't know what happened." Natalie felt a lump form in her throat. She wasn't sure she wanted to have this conversation, but she knew she couldn't avoid it forever. Taking a deep breath, she nodded and gestured for them to step outside. The evening air was cool, the city's lights twinkling above them as they stood on the sidewalk. "Okay," she said, crossing her arms protectively. "Let's talk." Matt looked at her, his expression serious. "Did I do something? I feel like you've been avoiding me, and I don't know why." Natalie bit her lip, trying to figure out how to say what she was feeling. "I saw you, Matt, at the book fair." His brow furrowed in confusion. "The book fair? What do you mean?" "I saw you with a girl," Natalie said, her voice quieter now. "You two looked close. I thought we had something, but seeing you with her, I just..." "Wait," Matt interrupted, realization dawning on his face. "You mean my sister?" Natalie blinked, taken aback. "Your sister?" "Yeah," Matt said, letting out a small, relieved laugh. "Natalie, that was my sister, Emma. She was helping me pick out a book for you, actually." Natalie's heart stopped for a moment. "For me?" "Yeah," Matt said, smiling softly. "Your birthday's this weekend, right? I was planning to surprise you with it, but I guess the surprise didn't go quite as planned." Natalie felt her face flush with embarrassment and relief all at once. She had spent days spiraling, thinking the worst, when all along Matt had been thinking about her. About what to get her for her birthday. The weight on her chest suddenly lifted, replaced by a warmth that spread through her. I didn't know," she stammered, feeling foolish. I thought she was your girlfriend." Matt shook his head, his smile growing. "No, definitely not. Emma's my little sister. She's actually the one who suggested I get you that book we were looking at." Natalie felt a surge of emotion, a mix of guilt and happiness. I'm so sorry, Matt. I should have just talked to you instead of jumping to conclusions. Hey, it's okay, Matt said, stepping closer. I get it. Misunderstandings happen. But I want you to know, Natalie, I like you. I've liked you for a while now. Her heart swelled at his words, and for the first time in days, she allowed herself to hope again. I like you too, Matt, she admitted, her voice soft but certain. For a moment, they stood there, the bustling city fading into the background as they looked at each other. The tension that had been hanging between them dissolved, replaced by a quiet understanding. Natalie felt the weight of her worries slip away, and all that remained was the warmth of Matt's presence and the knowledge that he had been thinking of her all along. So, Matt said, breaking the silence with a teasing grin. Are you still leaving the city for your birthday weekend, or can I take you out to celebrate? Natalie laughed, her heart light again. I was planning to visit my mom, but maybe I could stay in the city for a little while longer. Good, Matt said, his eyes twinkling. Because I've been planning this birthday dinner for you, and I think you're going to love it. Natalie smiled, feeling a flutter of excitement in her chest. I guess I'll have to see what you've got planned, then. Matt leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a playful whisper. I promise it'll be worth staying for. As they stood there on the sidewalk, the city alive around them, Natalie felt like things were finally falling into place. The misunderstandings, the uncertainty. It all seemed to melt away in the face of Matt's quiet sincerity. She had spent days worrying about whether he liked her, but now, hearing it from his own lips, she realized that sometimes, the things you hope for the most are right in front of you. And this time, she wasn't going to let her fears get in the way of something good. The weekend came quickly, and true to his word, Matt had planned a perfect birthday celebration for Natalie. They spent the evening at a quaint little restaurant tucked away in a quiet part of the city, sharing stories and laughing over a candlelit dinner. Matt had even brought along the book he and Emma had chosen for her, a beautiful, hardcover edition of one of her favorite authors, with a sweet note tucked inside the front cover. As the night drew to a close, Natalie couldn't help but feel grateful for how everything had turned out. The awkwardness, the confusion, it all seemed so distant now, replaced by the warmth of Matt's friendship and the promise of something more. And as they walked through the city streets, hand in hand, Natalie realized that sometimes, the best things in life come from the unexpected moments, the ones you can't plan for. Moments like meeting someone in a cooking class, or finding out that the person you've been hoping for feels the same way. In the end, Natalie's birthday wasn't just a celebration of another year gone by. It was a beginning of something new, something that felt real and full of possibility. And with Matt by her side, she couldn't wait to see where it would lead. With this, we come to the end of our story. I wish you a good night and sweet dreams. I will meet you again soon in the next video.